Brett Cooper had gotten used to the silence. 3 years living alone in the Colorado mountains 20 miles from the nearest town, and he'd learned to appreciate the quiet. No traffic, no neighbors, no questions about why a former Marine was hiding out in the wilderness. Just him, his cabin, and the woods. The blizzard started around 8 that evening. February storms in the Rockies were no joke, and this one was shaping up to be a monster. Wind hammered against the log walls, making the whole structure creak. Snow piled up fast against the windows. Brett kept the fire going, checked his supplies, made sure the generator had fuel. Standard procedure for riding out a storm. He was half asleep in his chair when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong, cutting through the wind's howl. A crash, distant but massive, like something heavy slamming into the forest. Trees splintering. The cabin shook slightly. Brett was on his feet instantly, old instincts kicking in. He grabbed his rifle from the rack, checked the magazine, pulled on his heavy coat and boots. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness as he opened the door. The wind hit him like a physical force, driving snow into his face. He trudged into the storm, following his gut toward where the sound had come from. The snow was already knee-deep and getting worse. His flashlight picked up broken branches, a trail of destruction cutting through the trees. Something had definitely crashed, and recently. Then his light found the crater. 20 yards into the woods, a section of forest was just gone, trees knocked flat in a circle. In the center was wreckage, pieces of what looked like metal but not any metal Brett recognized. It was smooth, almost organic looking, still smoking despite the snow. That's when he saw the tracks leading away from the crash. Footprints, human-sized but wrong somehow. They led back toward his cabin. Brett moved faster, his grip tightening on the rifle. When he came around the side of his cabin, his flashlight found them on his porch. 5 of them. Women, or at least shaped like women but definitely not human. They were tall, taller than him, with athletic builds visible even through their damaged armor. Their skin was silver, actually silver, like polished metal but clearly organic. And that silver skin was turning an alarming shade of blue in the cold. They were collapsed in various positions on his porch, clearly in bad shape. Their armor was torn and scorched. Dark blood, almost black, leaked from wounds. One of them had what looked like a broken arm bent at a wrong angle. The tallest one, lying closest to his door, lifted her head as his light hit them. Her eyes opened and they were gold. Actual metallic gold, glowing faintly in the darkness. She looked at him with an expression he recognized instantly, even on an alien face. Desperation. Please. Her voice was rough, accented in a way Brett couldn't place. Help us. For about 2 seconds, Brett's mind tried to process what he was seeing. Aliens. Real, actual aliens on his porch. This should be impossible. This should be some kind of hallucination from bad jerky or something. But the Marine training took over. Didn't matter what they were. They were injured, freezing, and on his doorstep. Questions could wait. Can you walk? He asked the tall one. She tried to push herself up, failed, collapsed back down. No, too weak. Brett slung his rifle over his shoulder and grabbed her under the arms. She was heavy, solid muscle, but he'd carried wounded Marines through worse conditions. He dragged her through his door, across the wooden floor, and positioned her near the fireplace. 4 more trips through the blizzard. Each time, Brett hauled another alien woman inside. They were all similarly built, all warriors from the look of them, all in terrible shape. The second one he brought in was barely conscious. The third one had a nasty burn across her shoulder that blistered her silver skin black. By the time he got the 5th one inside and shut the door against the storm, Brett was breathing hard and his back was screaming at him. His cabin, built for one person, was suddenly very crowded. He threw every piece of wood he had into the fireplace, building the fire up until it roared. Then he grabbed every blanket he owned, his sleeping bag, even some old curtains, and started wrapping the aliens up. Their skin was ice cold to the touch, and that blue tinge was getting worse. The tall one, the leader he assumed, watched him work. Her gold eyes tracked his every movement as he moved between her people, checking wounds, trying to warm them up. Why? She started, her voice weak. Why help us? You don't know us. You're hurt, Brett said simply, wrapping a blanket around the one with the burn. That's all I need to know. He grabbed his first aid kit, knowing it probably wasn't designed for alien biology but figuring the basics were universal. Stop bleeding, prevent infection, treat shock. He started with the worst injuries, using pressure bandages on the wounds that were still leaking blood. The tall one grabbed his hand suddenly, her grip surprisingly strong despite her condition. Hunters, she said urgently. They're coming for us. They tracked our ship. They'll find us here. Brett looked at her, at those strange golden eyes filled with fear and determination. How long? Days. Maybe less. She coughed, her whole body shaking. When they come, you should run. They'll kill anyone who helps us. Brett stood up, walked to his gun cabinet and started pulling out weapons. His rifle, his shotgun, his pistol, boxes of ammunition. He laid them out on the table with practiced efficiency. Let them come, he said, his voice calm and cold. It was the voice he'd used in combat, the one that meant he'd already made his decision and nothing would change it. I've got enough ammo, enough supplies. This cabin's defensible. And I didn't spend 2 tours in Afghanistan to run from a fight. The tall alien stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You'd fight for us? For strangers. You're in my house now, Brett said, checking the action on his shotgun. That makes you my responsibility. For the first time since he'd found them, something like hope appeared in those golden eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Brett just nodded, moving back to tend to her injuries. Outside, the blizzard raged on, and somewhere out there, hunters were coming. But inside his cabin, 5 wounded aliens were starting to warm up, starting to believe they might actually survive. And Brett Cooper, who'd been hiding from the world for 3 years, suddenly had something worth fighting for again. By the time dawn broke, the blizzard had passed and the aliens were looking significantly better. Their silver skin had returned to its normal color, no longer that terrifying blue. The wounds were healing at a rate that would have been impossible for humans, scabbing over and sealing within hours instead of days. Brett made coffee and started breakfast, frying up eggs and bacon for himself while watching his unexpected guests. They sat together near the fireplace, talking quietly in their own language, occasionally glancing his way. The tall one finally stood and walked over. Up close, in better light, Brett could see details he'd missed during the chaos of last night. She was probably close to 6.5 feet tall, built like an Olympic athlete. Her armor, now that he looked at it properly, seemed to be made of overlapping plates that moved with her body, almost alive. I am Arya, she said, her accent still thick but her English clear. Leader of this hunting pack. We owe you our lives. Brett flipped an egg. Brett Cooper. And you're welcome. Now, you want to tell me what's actually going on? Over the next hour, the story came out. Arya and her warriors were from a planet called Valkros, somewhere Brett had never heard of because apparently Earth wasn't exactly on the galactic map yet. On their world, they were elite hunters, trained from childhood to track and kill the most dangerous creatures across multiple planets. But their government had become corrupt, selling out their best warriors to the highest bidder. Arya's pack had been purchased by slavers, destined for some kind of fighting arena. They'd managed to escape during transport, stole a small ship and ran. The slavers had been chasing them for weeks. We thought Earth would be safe, Arya explained. Remote. Undeveloped. We could hide here, repair our ship, plan our next move. She gestured at the broken armor. But they hit us before we could land properly. We crashed. And they're still coming, Brett said. It wasn't a question. Yes. They have tracking technology. They know we're here, somewhere in this region. They'll search systematically until they find us. Brett nodded, absorbing this. How many? The slaver crew? 12 warriors. Well-armed, well-trained. Their leader, Dax, is ruthless. Arya met his eyes. You should leave, Brett. Take whatever you need and go. When they come, we'll fight, but there's no reason for you to die in our battle. This is my home, Brett said simply. I'm not leaving. Over the next 2 days, an odd routine developed. Brett shared his food, which the Valkros could eat though they found Earth meat strangely bland. In return, they told him about their world, their culture, their training. Brett learned that Valkros society was built around hunting packs, usually 5 to 7 warriors who trained together from childhood. Strength and skill determined rank, and the culture valued directness over politics. They were warriors in the truest sense, living for the challenge of the hunt. What fascinated Brett was how helpless they seemed in certain situations. These were elite soldiers, capable of incredible physical feats, but they'd never experienced real winter before. They didn't know how to start a fire without electronic igniters. They'd never tracked prey through snow. Their entire combat style relied on advanced technology, sensors, and targeting systems that didn't work after the crash. Brett found himself teaching them basic survival skills. How to read weather patterns. How to move quietly through snow. How to use manual weapons effectively instead of relying on tech. Arya watched him constantly. Brett noticed it on the second day. Wherever he went in the cabin, whatever he did, her golden eyes followed. When he checked the perimeter alarms he'd set up, she watched. When he cleaned his weapons with practiced efficiency, she watched. When he rationed their food supplies, calculating how long they could hold out, she watched. It wasn't threatening. It was more like evaluation, study. The other warriors noticed too. One of them, a slightly shorter Valkyros with a scar across her cheek, whispered something to Arya in their language. Arya responded sharply and the other woman laughed. On the third day things came to a head. Brett was at his workbench, field stripping his rifle for cleaning. It was a meditative process, something he'd done 1,000 times. Another warrior, introduced as Nova, approached him. She was probably the second in command, based on how the others deferred to her. "You're very skilled," Nova said, her voice carrying a tone that made Brett look up. She was smiling and there was definite interest in her golden eyes. "Among my people, such competence is attractive." Before Brett could figure out how to respond to that, Arya was suddenly there, moving with that incredible alien speed. She didn't touch Nova, but she positioned herself directly between them, her posture aggressive. "He gave us shelter when we were dying," Arya said, her voice hard. "He's fed us, protected us, taught us. By our oldest laws, I claim him first." The cabin went dead silent. The other 3 warriors who'd been maintaining weapons in the corner, looked up with sudden intense interest. Brett set down the rifle parts carefully. "Claim me? What does that mean?" Arya turned to face him, and her expression shifted from aggressive to something more complex. Determined, yes, but also almost nervous? On Valkyros, the strongest hunter in a pack has first right to choose their mate. It's how we ensure the best partnerships, the strongest bonds. "Mate," Brett repeated, making sure he understood correctly. "Yes. You've proven yourself worthy. You're skilled, calm under pressure, capable. You risked yourself for strangers without hesitation." Those golden eyes locked onto his with uncomfortable intensity. "I choose you, Brett Cooper." Nova made a sound that might have been a laugh. She backed off, hands raised in mock surrender, but she was grinning. "Fair claim, Arya. The human is impressive." The other warriors were nodding, apparently finding this completely reasonable. Brett stood there, rifle parts forgotten, trying to process what just happened. "Hold on. Don't I get a say in this?" "Of course," Arya said quickly. "A claiming can be refused. But you should know, among my people, this is the highest honor. I'm offering you partnership, equality. On Valkyros, a hunter's mate is their equal in all things." "I just met you 3 days ago," Brett pointed out, though part of him appreciated how straightforward this all was. No games, no hints, just direct communication. "Yes, and in 3 days you've shown more honor and strength than warriors I've known for years." Arya stepped closer, and Brett was reminded again of how tall she was, how physically powerful. But her voice was almost gentle. "I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm just making my intentions clear. It's our way." Nova laughed again from across the room. "Better decide fast, Brett. If Arya's claim isn't accepted or rejected, the rest of us can't make our own approach. You've got the whole pack waiting." Brett looked around at the 5 alien warriors in his cabin, all watching this interaction with varying degrees of amusement and interest. His quiet, isolated life had definitely taken a turn he never could have predicted. "This is insane," he muttered. "Yes," Arya agreed, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. "But you pulled 5 dying aliens into your home during a blizzard and offered to fight their battles. You don't exactly choose the normal path yourself, Brett Cooper." She had a point there. Outside, snow covered the mountains, and somewhere out there, slavers were coming. Inside, Brett had somehow become the center of an alien courtship ritual he barely understood. He'd gone from hiding from the world to being claimed by an alien warrior princess in less than a week. His old life seemed very far away now. The slavers came at dawn on the 5th day, just as Arya had predicted. Brett was already awake, sitting by the window with his coffee, watching the tree line. He'd learned to trust his instincts in Afghanistan, and those instincts had been screaming at him since midnight. He saw the shimmer first, a distortion in the air near the edge of the forest. Cloaking technology probably, but not perfect. Brett set down his coffee and picked up the radio handset. "They're here," he said quietly into the transmitter. "North tree line. At least 10, maybe more." From various positions around the property, 4 clicks came back in response. The Valkyros warriors were in position, waiting. The past 5 days had been intense. Once Brett realized the slavers were definitely coming, he'd gone into full combat mode. And Arya's pack, for all their advanced technology and training, had never fought like humans fight. Brett had shown them everything he knew about asymmetric warfare. how to use the environment as a weapon, how to set traps that didn't rely on fancy tech, how to think like guerrilla fighters instead of conventional soldiers. The Valkyros had been skeptical at first. Nova had actually laughed when Brett showed them a tripwire connected to a homemade explosive. "This is primitive," she'd said not unkindly. "Primitive works," Brett had replied. "It works because they won't expect it. They're looking for energy signatures, tech signatures. They're not looking for a hole in the ground covered with sticks and snow." They'd learned fast. Arya especially had taken to the tactics with frightening speed, understanding the philosophy behind guerrilla warfare almost instinctively. She was a hunter after all, and hunting was about using every advantage, every trick. Now, watching the slavers advance on his cabin, Brett felt the familiar cold calm settle over him. This was what he'd been trained for. This was what he was good at. The slaver leader's voice suddenly boomed across the clearing, amplified by some kind of speaker system. The voice was deep, arrogant, speaking accented English. "Humans of this dwelling, we know you harbor stolen property. Surrender the Valkyros females immediately, and you will not be harmed. Resist, and we are authorized to use lethal force." Brett picked up his own megaphone, a simple battery-powered one he'd bought years ago. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now and I won't press charges." There was a pause. Then harsh laughter. "Amusing. You have 30 seconds to comply." Brett didn't bother responding. He just waited, watching the slavers move into formation. 12 of them, all heavily armored, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. They advanced in a standard tactical formation, professional and confident. They hit the first tripwire when they were 20 yards from the cabin. The explosion was beautiful, Brett thought dispassionately. He'd buried the homemade charge shallow, packed it with scrap metal for shrapnel. 2 slavers went flying, their fancy armor no match for basic physics and a lot of metal moving very fast. The formation broke immediately, soldiers diving for cover. That's when Nova opened fire from her position in the trees. Brett had given her his hunting rifle, a .308 with a good scope. She'd never used a powder-based weapon before, but her accuracy was incredible. The first shot took a slaver in the neck, right in the gap between helmet and chest plate. The second shot hit another in the leg, dropping him. The slavers returned fire, plasma bolts scorching the trees where Nova had been. But she was already moving, exactly like Brett had taught her. Shoot and relocate. Never stay in one place. More explosions as the slavers triggered additional traps. Brett had spent 3 days rigging the approaches to his cabin with every improvised explosive he could build. The slavers were trying to advance, but every step was a gamble. One of them, probably the leader based on the fancier armor, started shouting orders in a language Brett didn't understand. The slavers began moving more carefully, watching for traps. That's when the pitfalls opened up. Brett had dug 3 of them, each about 8 feet deep, covered with branches and snow. Simple, ancient, effective. 2 slavers fell through, screaming as they dropped into the holes. Brett had put sharpened stakes at the bottom, angled to wound rather than kill. Wounded enemies were louder, more distracting, more demoralizing than dead ones. The slaver formation was in chaos now. They'd expected a quick retrieval mission, maybe some light resistance from primitives. They weren't prepared for this. Arya emerged from the cabin, and Brett had to admit she was magnificent. She'd adapted completely to his style of fighting, combining her natural speed and strength with human tactics. She moved low and fast, using the terrain for cover, approaching the slavers from an angle they weren't watching. When she hit their flank, it was devastating. She'd abandoned her damaged high-tech weapons for a simple combat knife and a tomahawk Brett had given her. Against the armored slavers, she went for joints and weak points, fighting with brutal efficiency. Brett provided covering fire with his shotgun, keeping the slavers pinned while Arya worked. The other Valkyros warriors, Luna, Kira, and Sage, hit from different angles, turning the fight into a nightmare for the slaver squad. The leader, Dax, finally realized what was happening. His superior technology meant nothing when his soldiers were spread out, wounded, disoriented, and fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Fall back," he roared. "Tactical retreat." But retreating through a trapped battlefield was just as dangerous as advancing. Another explosion caught a slaver who stepped wrong. Nova's rifle cracked again and another soldier went down. The survivors ran, abandoning their wounded, scrambling back toward their ship. Brett let them go. He'd made his point. Within 20 minutes of first contact, it was over. 4 slavers dead, 3 wounded and captured, 5 fled back to their ship. Brett watched from his window as their vessel lifted off, engines screaming, disappearing into the morning sky. Arya walked back through the snow toward the cabin, breathing hard, her silver skin streaked with dark blood, some hers, most not. She was grinning, her golden eyes bright with something that looked like joy. "Your way of fighting," she said, stopping in front of Brett as he stepped out onto the porch. "It's beautiful. Vicious and clever and perfect." Brett shrugged, checking her for serious injuries. She had some cuts, nothing major. "Humans don't usually win on strength alone. We have to be smarter, use every advantage. You just experienced asymmetric warfare. We fight with honor on Valkros," Arya said. "Strength against strength, warrior against warrior. But this." She gestured at the trapped battlefield, the evidence of their victory. "This is hunting. Real hunting. Using everything, every tool, every trick." Nova emerged from the trees, Brett's rifle slung over her shoulder, looking equally energized. "That was the most fun I've had in years." They never knew what hit them. The other warriors gathered, checking each other for wounds, talking excitedly in their own language. Brett could see it in their faces. They'd discovered something new, a different way of thinking about combat. "We need to secure the wounded," Brett said, falling back into tactical thinking. "Search them for tracking devices. Make sure that ship is really gone and not just regrouping." "Already on it," Luna said, dragging one of the wounded slavers toward the cabin. Arya stayed beside Brett, watching him work. "On Valkros we would never have survived that fight. We would have met them head-on, strength against strength. We would have lost. Different circumstances require different tactics," Brett said. "That's the key. Adapt to the situation, use what you have, think like your enemy but better." She touched his arm, and there was something new in her expression. Respect had been there before, but this was deeper. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. "I chose well when I claimed you," she said quietly. Brett met those golden eyes and found himself smiling despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. "Yeah, maybe you did." Around them, the Colorado mountains were peaceful again, snow-covered and beautiful. The evidence of the battle would be gone in the next snowfall. But something had changed. Brett had proven that human tactics, human thinking, could stand against advanced alien technology. And Arya's pack had learned that sometimes the best weapon wasn't the most advanced one. Sometimes it was just a good plan, basic tools, and the willingness to fight smart instead of fair. A week after the battle, Brett's cabin had settled into an odd kind of peace. The wounded slavers had been dealt with, restrained and questioned, then left tied up near the crashed ship with enough supplies to survive until their own people found them. Brett wasn't a killer unless he had to be, and the fight was over. The Valkros warriors had fully recovered from their initial injuries, and they'd spent the week exploring the mountains, hunting local wildlife, testing themselves against Earth's wilderness. Brett watched them adapt, saw them learning to appreciate the challenge of surviving without their technology. But he could also see the tension building, especially in Arya. She sat by the fire most evenings, staring into the flames, her expression troubled. The others noticed too, growing quieter, exchanging glances. Finally, on the 7th night, Nova broke the silence. "We need to talk about what happens next," she said, her voice cutting through the crackling of the fire. The other warriors, Luna, Kira, and Sage, all looked up, clearly relieved someone had finally said it. Arya nodded slowly. "Yes, we do." Brett set down the piece of wood he'd been whittling. "Okay. Talk." "We can't go back to Valkros," Arya said bluntly. "Our government sold us. If we return, we'll either be killed as traitors or sold again to someone else. Our home is closed to us. There are other planets," Kira added. "Colonies, frontier worlds. Places that would take experienced warriors. But we don't want to leave Earth," Sage said quietly, and everyone looked at her. She was the youngest of the pack, barely speaking most of the time, so her words carried weight. "This place, it's different. Challenging. Real." Nova laughed, but it wasn't mocking. "She's right. I've hunted on 17 different worlds, killed creatures that would give you nightmares. But this week, tracking a deer through the snow without scanners? That was the most alive I've felt in years. Earth doesn't have our technology," Luna said. "We'd be starting over, learning everything new. It would be hard." "Hard is good," Arya said. "Hard makes you strong. We've gotten soft relying on our tech. Brett showed us that." Brett listened to them debate, watching the dynamics of the pack. They were a real team, completely comfortable challenging each other, no ego getting in the way. It reminded him of the good parts of military life, the brotherhood he'd missed. But he could see Arya's conflict. She kept glancing at him, then away, her jaw tight. After the others had talked themselves into circles for half an hour, Brett stood. I'm going to check the perimeter. Arya, walk with me? She followed him outside without a word. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead without any light pollution for hundreds of miles. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching through the snow. Brett led them to his favorite spot, a small rise that overlooked the valley, mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. Beautiful, Arya said softly. Yeah. Brett turned to face her. So what's really bothering you? She was quiet for a long moment, those golden eyes fixed on the horizon. Among my people, when a hunter claims a mate, they bring them into their territory. Their home. It's tradition going back thousands of years. And your territory is gone, Brett said, understanding. Yes. And even if it wasn't, you belong here. This is your territory, your home. I can see it in how you move through these mountains, how you know every tree and rock. You're as much a part of this place as the wolves or the eagles. She turned to him, and in the starlight, he could see the conflict in her face. So I have a choice to make. I claimed you, but by our laws, I should take you to my territory. Since I have no territory, I should let the claim go. Release you. Allow you to stay where you belong. Brett crossed his arms, studying her. Is that what you want? No, she said immediately, fiercely. But what I want doesn't change the reality. You have a life here. A home. And I'm asking you to give that up, to come with us into the stars, to hunt across galaxies and see things humans have never seen. She stepped closer, and he could see moisture in her eyes, the first real vulnerability he'd seen from this warrior who'd faced down slavers without flinching. I want you to come with us, Brett. I want to show you my culture, teach you to hunt the way we hunt, share everything we are with you. But I also know that's selfish. You'd be giving up everything familiar, everything safe, for a life of constant danger and uncertainty. Brett let her finish, then asked quietly, You done? She blinked. What? Are you done making decisions for me? He couldn't help but smile at her confused expression. Because I'm a grown man, Arya. I can decide what I want for myself. I'm not trying to. Yeah, you are. You're trying to be noble, trying to make the hard choice so I don't have to. I appreciate it. But here's the thing you're missing. Brett gestured at the mountains around them. You're right. This is my home. I love these mountains. But you know what? I've been hiding here for 3 years. He looked back at her. After my last deployment, things went bad. Lost some friends, did some things I'm not proud of, and when I came back, I just checked out. Bought this cabin, disappeared into the wilderness, told myself I was happy alone. You seem happy, Arya said. I was surviving, Brett corrected. There's a difference. Then you and your pack showed up, bleeding on my porch, and for the first time in years I had a purpose again. Something worth fighting for. People who needed me. He moved closer to her. So here's my counteroffer. You don't have to take me to your territory. You could stay here. Hunt these mountains. Learn to survive the way humans do, without all your fancy tech making it easy. I'll teach you everything, tracking, wilderness survival, how to live off the land. Arya stared at him. You'd want us to stay? All of us. If you're claiming me, then we're a pack now, right? That's what you said. And packs stick together. Brett smiled. Besides, that cabin's too small for one person anyway. We could expand it, build proper quarters. There's plenty of game in these mountains, plenty of challenges. You want hard. I'll give you hard. But your solitude, Arya said. Your peace. We disrupt everything. Good. I've had enough peace. I've had enough of hiding. Brett took her hand, feeling the strange coolness of her silver skin. You want to know the truth? These past 2 weeks, teaching you, fighting beside you, being part of something again? That's the most alive I've felt since I left the service. Arya's golden eyes searched his face. You would really give up the chance to see the galaxy? To travel the stars? The stars aren't going anywhere, Brett said. Maybe someday we'll go exploring. But right now, I want to teach 5 alien warriors how to be mountain women. I want to see what happens when Valkrow's hunting instincts meet Colorado wilderness. I think it could be something special. A slow smile spread across Arya's face, genuine and warm. My pack would like that. They've already started talking about which parts of the forest they want to claim as hunting grounds. See? They're already adapting. But Brett, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. On Valkrow's, pack bonds are sacred. You wouldn't just be accepting me. You'd be becoming part of all of us. We fight together, hunt together, live together. It's intense. Brett laughed. I spent years in the Marines living in close quarters with people who die for me and I die for them. I think I can handle it. Arya stepped close, very close, her face inches from his. And the claiming? You accept it? Accept me? Yeah, Brett said quietly. I do. You're fierce, smart, adaptable. You push me to be better. And you've got that whole warrior princess thing going on which doesn't hurt. She laughed, the sound bright in the cold air. Then she kissed him, and it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fierce and certain, full of promise and challenge and a future neither of them had expected. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Arya rested her forehead against his. Then it's decided. We stay. We build something new here, something that's both Valkyros and human. Packs stick together, Brett said again. Yes, Arya agreed. They do. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and when they entered, four Valkyros warriors looked up with matching grins. About time, Nova said. We were about to send a search party. We're staying, Arya announced. All of us. This is our territory now. The cabin erupted in excited voices, the warriors already planning expansions, discussing hunting grounds, arguing about who would claim which area. Brett watched them, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, happiness. 8 months had changed everything. Brett stood on the expanded porch of what used to be his small cabin, looking out at what had become a legitimate compound. 3 new buildings surrounded the original structure, all built from local timber using a combination of human carpentry and Valkyros strength. What used to be a hermit's retreat now looked like a small village tucked into the Colorado mountains. The change hadn't happened overnight. About 2 months after Arya's pack decided to stay, another Valkyros ship had landed. 3 warriors, deserters from a military unit that had been sold off like Arya's pack. They'd heard rumors through underground channels about a group that had successfully escaped and was hiding on some backwater planet called Earth. Then more came. A pair of sisters who'd fled an arranged combat marriage. A veteran warrior named Riker who was done fighting for corrupt officials. Each one brought the same story. The Valkyros government was systematically betraying its own people, selling warriors to the highest bidder, and anyone who objected disappeared. Now, 8 months later, Brett counted 23 Valkyros living in the compound. 23 alien warriors who'd given up everything they knew to start over on a primitive planet, learning to survive the human way. And somehow Brett had become their teacher. It hadn't been his plan. He just started showing the new arrivals the same things he'd taught Arya's original pack. Wilderness survival, guerrilla tactics, how to hunt and fight without relying on technology. But word had spread. Among Valkyros refugees scattered across the galaxy, people were talking about the human who trained warriors in primitive methods that somehow worked better than advanced tech. Brett found himself running what amounted to a training camp. Every morning he had groups rotating through different skills. Tracking through the forest without electronic assistance. Building shelters using only natural materials. Hand-to-hand combat without powered armor. Marksmanship with simple firearms instead of plasma weapons. The Valkyros were incredible students. Their physical abilities and tactical minds, combined with human adaptability and resourcefulness, created something new. Something formidable. Arya had stepped naturally into leadership of the growing pack, but everyone understood that Brett was her partner in every way that mattered. They led together, taught together, made decisions together. The Valkyros, who came from a culture that respected strength above all else, had learned to respect Brett's different kind of strength. Wisdom, experience, and the ability to think outside the box. This morning, though, brought a new challenge. A ship landed just after dawn, larger than the small transports that usually brought refugees. 10 warriors emerged, and Brett could tell immediately they were different. Their armor was pristine, their weapons top of the line. They moved with the arrogance of people who'd never really been tested. Their leader, a tall male named Darius, surveyed the compound with obvious disdain. Brett, Arya, and Nova went out to meet them. So this is the famous Refuge, Darius said, his voice dripping with condescension. Wooden buildings. Manual tools. I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe them. He looked at Brett with barely concealed contempt. This is what you've become? Playing at primitive living with a human? Arya's expression didn't change, but Brett felt the tension in her shoulders. We're surviving. Thriving, actually. Something you might understand if you weren't so busy judging. We were elite warriors on Valkyros, one of Darius's team said. We don't need to learn how to start fires with sticks or shoot crude projectile weapons. We have actual skills. Nova laughed, the sound sharp. Is that right? Darius turned his sneer on her. Yes, that's right. We came here because we heard this might be a safe haven, but if this is the standard, we'll find somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't reject everything that makes us Valkyros. Brett had dealt with this attitude before, mostly in the military from soldiers who thought their rank or reputation made them untouchable. He caught Arya's eye and gave her a subtle nod. Arya smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Nova, why don't you show our guests what we've learned here? Nova stepped forward, addressing Darius directly. Here's the offer. We'll give you human weapons, rifles, knives, whatever you want. You use your gear, your tech, whatever makes you feel superior. Then we go into those woods. She pointed at the forest. You have 1 hour to find us and tag even one person from our pack. Just one. And if we do? Darius asked. Then you're right. We've wasted our time here, and you can leave knowing you're better than us. And when we win? When you lose, Nova corrected, you stay. You train. You learn. You put aside your arrogance and accept that maybe, just maybe, there's more to being a warrior than fancy armor and plasma rifles. Darius exchanged glances with his team. Brett could see the calculation in their eyes. They thought this would be easy, a quick demonstration that would let them leave with their pride intact. Deal? Darius said. 20 minutes later, the challenge began. Brett's pack, Arya, Nova, Luna, Kira, Sage, and Riker, disappeared into the forest carrying only human weapons and wearing simple cold-weather gear. No armor, no tech, no scanners. Darius's team moved into the woods confidently, their armor sensors sweeping for heat signatures, their targeting systems active, moving in perfect formation. Brett watched from a hilltop with some of the other compound residents. He'd set up observation posts so they could see how it played out without interfering. The first 15 minutes, Darius's team moved efficiently through the forest, their scanners searching. But they weren't finding anything. The compound pack knew these woods intimately now, knew how to mask their heat signatures using the terrain, knew how to move without leaving the electronic traces the Valkyros scanners were designed to detect. At the 20-minute mark, Darius's team started getting frustrated. Brett could see it in their movements, the way they bunched up, started arguing with each other. At 30 minutes, they walked right past Nova's position without seeing her. She was in a tree, perfectly still, using natural camouflage Brett had taught her. After they passed, she dropped down silently and followed them. 40 minutes in, Darius called for his team to regroup. They stood in a clearing, recalibrating their sensors, trying to figure out why their advanced technology couldn't find 6 people in a forest. That's when Arya made her move. She didn't attack, that wasn't the challenge. She just appeared at the edge of the clearing, visible for exactly 3 seconds, then vanished again. Darius's team scrambled toward where she'd been, but she was gone. Then Luna appeared on their other flank doing the same thing. Then Sage. Then Riker. Brett's pack was hurting them, controlling their movement, making them chase shadows. It was a classic guerrilla tactic. Make the enemy think they're hunting you while you're actually hunting them. At 55 minutes, Darius's team was spread out, frustrated, their formation broken. That's when Nova, using a simple human rifle, put a paint round into a tree 6 inches from Darius's head. The hour ended with Darius and his team standing in the middle of the forest, their advanced armor and weapons useless, having failed to tag even one member of the compound pack. When they returned to the compound, Darius looked furious but also shaken. Brett's pack emerged from different directions, calm and unhurried. How? Darius demanded. Our scanner should have found you. Our technology is superior in every way. Technology is a tool, Brett said, stepping forward. And tools are only as good as the person using them. Your scanners look for electronic signatures, heat patterns, movement that matches your database. We taught our people to move differently, think differently. You were hunting ghosts because you relied on your tech to tell you where to look instead of using your own senses. Arya moved to stand beside Brett. You're right that you're elite warriors. But you've forgotten how to be hunters. Real hunters use everything. Technology when it helps, natural skills when it doesn't, and their minds always. One of Darius's team, a younger warrior, spoke up quietly. Could you teach us? Darius shot her a look, but she didn't back down. We came here looking for safety, but maybe we need more than that. Maybe we need to remember what we've forgotten. That evening, 10 new warriors joined the compound. Darius was the last to agree, his pride wounded but his curiosity finally stronger than his arrogance. Days later, Brett sat on the porch with Arya, watching snow begin to fall. It was late evening and the compound was settling down for the night. Lights glowed in the windows of the various buildings, smoke rising from chimneys. Somewhere, someone was singing in the Valkyros language, and someone else was playing a human guitar they'd learned to make. I got word today, Arya said quietly. 3 more ships are coming next week. Word is spreading faster now across Valkyros space. They're calling you, the human who trains the untrainable. Brett snorted. That's ridiculous. I'm just teaching survival skills. You're teaching us to be more than we were. Arya leaned against him, her silver skin warm against his side. You know what's funny? I came to Earth running for my life, expecting to hide until I died. Now I'm building something better than anything I had back home. A real pack, based on trust and skill instead of politics and corruption. You built this, Brett said. I just showed you some tricks. No. Arya turned to look at him, her golden eyes serious. We built this together. That's the whole point. Valkyros culture was strong but rigid. Human culture is adaptable but fragile. Together we're creating something that's both strong and flexible. Brett pulled her closer, watching the snow fall over their compound. You claimed the right human, I guess. She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. The only human crazy enough to take in 5 dying alien warriors during a blizzard and decide to start a revolution. I didn't plan to start a revolution. The best ones never do. In the distance, Brett could see some of the warriors practicing hand-to-hand combat moves he'd taught them, their movements blending Valkyros strength with human technique. Others were working on a new building, combining alien efficiency with human craftsmanship. What had started as 5 desperate refugees seeking shelter had become something bigger. A new way of thinking about strength, about survival, about what it meant to be a warrior. The best hunters weren't the ones with the most advanced technology or the biggest weapons. They were the ones who never stopped adapting, never stopped learning, never stopped fighting for each other. And somewhere in the galaxy, more ships were heading toward Earth, carrying warriors who'd heard the stories. Stories about a human and his alien pack, living in the mountains, proving that sometimes the most primitive methods were the most effective. Brett Cooper had spent 3 years hiding from the world. Now the world, or at least the Valkyros part of it, was coming to him. And somehow that felt exactly right.